Burn him if you got him. John Fibonacci talks about local Durango politics. So here you go. Let the jury decide. Here we go. It all started with this right here. I'm one of those guys that reads the Durango Herald. In fact, I've even applied for a job as a photojournalist. And, of course, they don't want to talk to John Fibonacci. So we said, okay, well, we'll just move on. Maybe I'll someday work for the San Francisco Chronicle. And, one of the things about being a, what do you want to call it, YouTube activist, photojournalist, John Fibonacci, best photographer in the whole world, is sometimes you got to talk about important things. So here you go. Let the jury decide. And what's the story behind that fake news? And what is fake news? And how does fake news even, how do we know to recognize it? Well, what happened was the ACLU came in. This is just kind of the skinny version. The ACLU came in to Durango and said, all right, guys, Durango, you beautiful town, you wonderful place to live, you need to stop preventing people from having jury trials. And then, boom, 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 here you go. There's the actual ACLU says Durango law is in violation of Colorado Constitution. And then fake news comes in and says, hey, we'll just let the jury decide. So here we go. We're going to see if that's true. Durango, Colorado. John Fibonacci, trespassing charge. Is it possible to trespass in a public space? Library. The library. I got kicked out of the fucking library, and they even hit me with trespassing in the middle of the day. So, of course, I photographed it, and I'm going to use this little summons. Here we go, 256059, and I'm going to see if I can truly get a jury trial, and to see if there's any credence to the ACLU's allegation that Durango does not offer or allow jury trials. And why that's so important is because a lot of times, well, let me just kind of cut to this chase. Just like in all aspects of life, there are some entities or industries that can become corrupt. And one of the most corrupt, heinous institutions in our country is actually in the Constitution, and it is our court system. And more people, specifically minority people and Fibonacci people, are hurt by courts than in any other Auschwitz gas chamber or anything you want to talk about. So one thing I want to do with this channel is I want to highlight something that's really important to me, and that is the importance of equality for men in civil and criminal cases. Now, I know that's kind of redundant. You're like, all right, we get it. You're hashtag MRA. We get it. We get it. But why that's so important is you just got to look around. In fact, just kind of tune this out for a second. Look around your room. Maybe you're on Facebook. Notice that a lot of people have sons. Maybe you are a son. And nothing is more unfair to men, specifically minority men, than the United States court system. So one thing I want to do in this channel is obviously I want to profile my photography, but I want to talk about important issues. I want to talk about how police misconduct and how entire cities will prevent jury trials, and that is such a big deal. And one thing I'm even personally realizing is, here in Durango, it's hard for a man to even get an incident report. And why that's important is because unless the cops write an incident report and charge somebody, the man never gets the hearing or the jury trial. So sometimes, let's call it legal sanitizing. That's kind of a nice way of saying it. We have to be careful of how the police treat men and how men are treated, specifically minority men. Now, I'm a white Fibonacci, but this is still true. Unless someone like you or Fibonacci cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So back to Facebook. You're probably even in the 4 or 5 minutes I've been doing this video, you probably have checked your Facebook like the average American. And it's hard to get the Americans' attention and to say our legal system and equality and men's rights and federally protected statuses, these are important things, not just for your home, but my home too. And when we have an entire group of people, men, that do not get fair trials, equality in civil and criminal cases or custodial cases, or even in silly things like trespassing. Now, here you go. They gave me a citation. I'm going to have a little hearing, hopefully have a hearing, and I'm going to be a pro se litigant. I'm going to have a jury trial, and I'm going to see if there's any credence to the ACLU's allegation is, will there be any encumbrances to me to get a jury trial? Because, here's the thing. This is what America likes. This is what the court system's like. They like wealthy white people. And you know what? I'm a white person. Here I am on Manna Mountain. Here's this guy coming out here. I'm telling him I'm doing a documentary on homelessness and how, and I even used the word juxtaposition. I said, here you are. And he's just that typical white American guy. I've not met him. And he just hates the idea that poor people live behind him in homelessness 2 or 3, 4, 500 yards away from his beautiful home. So I'm telling him I'm doing a documentary on homelessness, and I'm going to talk about men's rights and how civil courts and criminal courts really play a vital role or an important role. Here's a public trail, and he's yelling at me, get the fuck off his mountain, and I'm asking him, where does his privilege end? And for most people, these guys own court systems, they own businesses, and they really control the local economy. So Jonathan Benoji is going to report on that allegation, and I'm going to be a pro se litigant in 2 jury trials, one for trespassing, which I don't know how you could trespass in a public library in the middle of the day. And here's another question. Can a city employee who's not a judge remove somebody from the public space? Of course, I told them my name is Jonathan Spears, and they said, well, but I'm a journalist under Fibonacci. So they didn't just give Jonathan Fibonacci or Jonathan Spears a trespassing ticket, but they're actually preventing journalism because now I am barred from going to the library. Well, as a homeless person, that's where I go to check on jobs and things like that. And so we'll talk about public spaces and how women control public spaces and how a woman, all she has to do is make a phone call and the cops will come pick them up, whoever's offending that female. And I'm eventually going to prepare a federal petition and talk about the things that I discover of how I feel this beautiful, beautiful place called Durango, how really, even though it's beautiful, violates federal law left and right. I think Dr. Seuss said it right. He says, nothing's going to change unless we care a whole bunch. And I know for me to ask you to care about men's rights or minority rights in civil and criminal cases, for you that's probably irrelevant. But Ernest Hemingway said, for whom the bell tolls. And in America, there is no more grievous, heinous, corrupt institution than the American court system. And it begins in juvenile hall and criminal cases and civil cases and how men can't get custody rights and how all it takes is a woman just making a phone call. And then once a woman makes a phone call, the cops serve the female class at the expense of the male class. And men's rights matter. And remember, federally protected statuses include gender. So test me in this. Ask somebody who's not watching Fibonacci, which is a lot of people. Say, all right, John Fibonacci, the best photographer in the whole world. Ask that person, say, talk to me about gender rights. And they'll probably almost reflexively talk about female rights and female entitlement. But remember, gender is not synonymous with having a vagina. Gender is synonymous with gender. And men are entitled to federally protected statuses. And I know that's offensive. And I'm going to prove it by having a jury trial. As a pro se litigant, we'll talk about homelessness, trespassing, and we'll even talk about how women have no trouble getting the police to serve them. But when a man needs something, whether he needs his property back or he needs his custodial rights enforced, historically and consistently men are told, sorry, we don't get involved, while they're protecting females. John Fibonacci takes on beautiful Durango. Now I want to be clear about something. I love this city. I love this city. It's one of the most, I've chosen it for a reason. San Francisco is my favorite city, but this is my favorite town. But federally protected statuses affects everybody. And while this trespassing charge nobody cares about Jonathan Fibonacci or even his beautiful photography, equality in civil cases and criminal cases and federally protected statuses and men's rights, those things cannot be overstated. Because if we look at what the court system has done to men and against men for the last 100 years, again, I think you would stand with me if you were just honest with the facts. that there is no more evil institution in America than the American court system, and how federally protected statuses, specifically against minority men, just do not exist, and how equality matters. Now, out here in beautiful Durango, it's a white country. I mean, I love this town. I love to photograph it. There's their football team. But one thing that Durango is, it's a very white country, a very white city. And when you start talking about federally protected statuses, invariably that's going to piss people off because they feel like you're against them. But I want to use my photography for good. Here's the local librarian kicking me out because she just didn't like me. Well, I said, well, fuck you. It doesn't matter that you like me. This is a public space. So she made one phone call. These are good guys. These are just local police. These are good people. But she's letting you know by her stance that she's a woman and I'm a man, and how dare I think that federally protected statuses and public spaces matter to me. I'm like, well, we'll see. Jonathan Minogue is going to have a jury trial, pro se litigant style. So here we go. I saw this recently. In fact, I just photographed this, and I think this will hopefully illustrate where my heart is, because I'm not against Durango. I'm against corrupt courts, and I mean that in a plural way. Whether you're in Oklahoma City, whether you're in Lubbock, Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Jack Dempsey land, Florida, New York, Manhattan, Compton, the courts need to be equal, and they need to serve all classes and all religions and even genders, and that includes men. So who's having that conversation except Jonathan Minogue? So here you go. See if how far my art can go, and if my art can even make an impact. So here you go. I just photographed this because, my concern is that people here in Durango would think, here's this photographer, and he's an amazing photographer, and yes, he's talking about how corrupt our courts are, and he's even talking about federally protected statuses and how they apply to men, and how women can't really just kick anybody out of a public space, and how there's going to be a federal petition. He's going to sue the city for, $50 million, buy Man a Mountain. Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe I should just stick with beautiful photography. But I saw this, and they're fixing the train. Not the train, but the train track. And I thought that was such a perfect metaphor for what I'm trying to accomplish. Because, there comes a time, I guess, in Durango land where you got to fix the track. And it's not that you're against the train. You don't hate the land. You don't hate the people. But there comes times you have to fix the track, and you have to go back, and you need to look at cases and look at federally protected statuses. And remember, judicial review is at the bedrock of our Constitution. These are guys literally fixing the track out here in Durango. And I thought, if there's anything I hope to do with my little silly trials out here in Durango, talking about men's rights and federally protected statuses, is I want to talk about the need to fix the court systems and courts. And what do the workers look like? And they're beautiful, and they have a voice. And these are men, and men hold our country together. Even this guy. There's always the guy in a group of workers that's a little diva-ish. And here, anyway, Jonathan Minogue fixes the court systems and talks about federally protected statuses. And I may not even be allowed a jury trial because, I'm going to be a pro se litigant. And there's all kinds of ways that judges, and I'm speaking in plural, that judges can prevent jury trials. That's why the ACLU said, stop it. So here we go. I'm going to end with some wise quotes by Dr. Seuss, something I started with earlier. Why should you care? Well, if you have sons, that's one big reason. If you have two sons, that's two big reasons. On activism, Dr. Seuss. Unless someone like you, or Fibonacci, cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. And I talk about federally protected statuses all the time, and men's rights, and the need for equality in civil and criminal cases, even to custodial law. But until somebody puts something on a federal petition, on an official record, it's just narrative. Nobody's afraid of a YouTube station. But federal petitions, that's a different story. Jonathan Minogue takes on the beautiful Durango, Colorado. I love this city. I love it so much that I hope that my little silly trespassing, my little silly parking tickets, which really comes out of homelessness. And we don't want to have that conversation of how cities kind of sanitize homelessness with private prisons. And these are all the things that I'm going to talk about in my Jonathan Benoji pro se litigant. Fix the track. Don't you know he loves this land? He's not against the train. He just likes a fair track. Jonathan Benoji is out. Thank you for taking this journey with me.